Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're going to fundamentally rethink how we look at our finances. Whether you're managing a massive corporate ledger or honestly just balancing your own household checkbook, getting too comfortable with your routines might secretly be costing you a fortune. So get ready, because we're exploring a seriously disruptive strategy today that totally flips traditional financial planning on its head. It's called the zero-based budgeting revolution.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth do we automatically approve last year's spending? Well, it's a trap. It's a trap that massive organizations and everyday people like us fall into year after year. We kind of just assume that because we spent, say, a certain amount on a category in the past, we inherently need to spend that exact same amount, plus a little extra, in the future.
And honestly, that assumption usually looks exactly like this, plus 2%. Or, maybe 3 or 5%. This number right here represents the standard incremental increase that traditional budgeting completely defaults to. A department head will look at last year's $1 million budget and simply ask for $1,020,000 this year just to account for inflation or slight growth. But they do this without ever actually questioning if that original $1 million was used efficiently in the first place. Crazy, right?
So, to dismantle this financial complacency, here is our roadmap for today. First, the budget bloat problem. Second, defining zero-based budgeting. Third, traditional versus zero-based. Fourth, ZBB in the real world. And fifth, weighing the pros and cons. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the budget bloat problem, the trap of incremental increases.
To really understand why we need a revolution here, we have to fully grasp the problem with the status quo. Relying on previous budgets basically acts as a mask. Blindly applying percentage increases year over year completely hides some profound inefficiencies. Think about it. If a department spent $50,000 on software subscriptions last year, a traditional budget just tacks on a couple of percentage points for the next year. It never stops to ask, hey, are we actually still using all those software licenses? By masking these underlying cost drivers, organizations literally lose track of where their resources are actually needed, which allows wasteful spending to just compound over time.
Which brings us to Section 2, defining zero-based budgeting, starting from scratch.
So this introduces a massive paradigm shift, zero-based budgeting, or ZBB for short. It's an intensive financial strategy that requires every single expense to be justified from scratch for each new reporting period. Really think about that phrase for a second, from scratch. In this model, last year's budget means absolutely nothing. When the new quarter or the new year kicks off, your budget is exactly zero.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the sheer level of accountability it demands. Justifying every expense from scratch means every single dollar literally has to earn its place on the ledger. ZBB forces managers to get in the weeds and analyze their highly granular needs. It's a strategic, top-down approach that doesn't just ask, so how much more do you need this time? But rather, wait, why do you need this at all?
And this isn't just some fleeting modern business trend. To ground this in real corporate history, zero-based budgeting was actually pioneered way back in the late 1960s by a former account manager at Texas Instruments named Peter Pyer. He recognized early on that corporate inertia was just destroying profitability, so he developed this exact method to force constant, rigorous evaluation of how a company operates. Moving right along to Section 3, traditional versus zero-based, a head-to-head comparison.
To truly appreciate the mechanics of Pyer's invention, we need to compare the old way with this disruptive new way directly. The differences are honestly night and day. Traditional budgeting, over there on the left, simply increments past budgets, meaning it only analyzes new expenditures. If you want $10,000 more than last year, you only have to justify that extra $10,000. But zero-based budgeting, on the right, starts at zero. It requires justification of both old and new expenditures. It puts the onus entirely on managers to optimize the resources they already have, rather than just blindly chasing higher revenue.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds in practice. ZBB in the real world, the construction company case.
Let's see how this plays out practically with a little mini mystery for us to solve. Imagine a construction equipment company. During their budgeting cycle, they notice a continuous, reoccurring 5% annual rise in the cost of specific outsourced manufacturing parts. Under a traditional budgeting model, this 5% increase might just be rubber-stamped, right? Managers would probably just shrug and say, well, that's just the cost of doing business.
But under zero-based budgeting, that 5% is a giant red flag that prompts a full review. Step 1, they identify the outsourced part cost hike, because remember, they're starting from zero. Step 2, forced to actually justify buying these parts again, the managers analyze the cost of manufacturing those exact same parts in-house with their own workers. And step 3, they realize it is actually cheaper to make them internally. Because ZBB forced them to justify the expense from scratch, they're empowered to make a highly strategic choice to shift production internally. That saves the company significant money instead of just blindly increasing an external supplier's budget year after year.
Now for our final section, number 5. Weighing pros and cons. The balancing act.
Look, no system is absolutely perfect, so let's objectively evaluate the trade-offs here. The advantages of ZB are definitely compelling. It focuses operations squarely on the highest revenue-generating activities. It demonstrably lowers costs. It provides immense budget flexibility because, hey, you aren't locked into last year's mistakes, and it strongly prevents resource misallocation. When managers actually have to think like owners about every single dollar, their execution becomes incredibly strategic.
But we absolutely must balance that with the disadvantages. Building a budget completely from zero is highly time and resource intensive. It requires a ton of manpower and incredibly deep analysis every single budgeting cycle. Also, because it heavily favors operations that generate direct, immediate revenue, it has a documented tendency to favor the short term. Because of this, vital areas that don't produce immediate cash, like long-term research and development or back-end client services, can unfortunately run a real risk of being underfunded.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway is this. Zero-based budgeting is definitely a heavy lift, but its ultimate value proposition is alignment. It ensures that every single financial decision aligns intimately with your current organizational goals, driving meaningful long-term savings. And while we've talked a lot about corporations today, this idea is just as applicable to your personal life. Individuals and families can absolutely use ZBB to stop those pesky financial leaks and really optimize their household incomes. Which leaves us with one final provocative question for you to chew on. Are you ready to start your budget from zero? Seriously, take a look at your own spending habits this month. If you had to justify every single dollar from scratch, how many of those expenses would actually survive? It's a fascinating challenge that might just revolutionize your financial life. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the status quo.